website that has advertising of local restaurants and local shops and coverage of arrests and trends and people, and perhaps most importantly, coverage of what happens with those who are elected to the city council. And Dick, thanks for joining us. The big story that my listener wants to hear you discuss is the prosecution by the county district attorney Neil Pinkston of Tim Boyd, the county commissioner. And this came as a result of a complaint by the mayor of East Ridge, Brent Lambert, who is seeking to, I guess, raise his status politically and become a county commissioner here in Hamilton County, Southeast Tennessee. What do you make? Tell my listener who hasn't been following this very closely what the story is and why maybe it should be important to him because of the ideas or perhaps the principles involved in this criminal case against Tim Boyd.
Well, first of all, what glowing accolades. I don't know if I can even begin to live up to some of the hype that you've just laid on me.
Okay.
Yeah, East Ridge is, I've lived there all of my life. Started East Ridge News Online 5 years ago, but politics out in East Ridge is essentially a blood sport. We're now in a new high-tech age with social media and Facebook, and the politicians are starting to capitalize on that. Before campaigns were carried out, this is almost, well, in a genteel way. No one ever went after anybody else out there with negative campaigning. It was a whisper campaign, David. Nobody went public with anything.
You mean back in the 90s and 80s?
Oh, well, oh yeah, and even into the 2000s, just up until recently. People would just whisper into their neighbors' ears. Well, you heard about so-and-so, and he's been divorced, or, he changed churches. We have a long history of our political leaders being heavily involved with churches, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, there is a separation between church and state. This Boyd Lambert thing has really taken off. Both of these guys have a perception problem. They're not the most beloved figures in the city. They're both very bright men. I know both of them personally, and I respect them both. I really do. I disagree often with Brent Lambert on some of the things that he's done. We have a problem being transparent out there, and some people believe there are hidden agendas, and there very well could be. But when it surfaced a couple of weeks ago that Tim Boyd apparently had threatened Brent Lambert's political career, his family, his business career, I was intrigued. Like, well, what's this all about? Well, we come to find out that there were some taped conversations, and we know in Tennessee, one person is aware of being taped. That's good enough for the government. Lambert was contacted by an attorney for the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, and that attorney, if I'm not mistaken, Alan McCauley, told Lambert that he had received a phone call from either someone in the Boyd campaign or a lawyer from the Boyd campaign saying that there was some damaging information that could be coming out against Brent in this commission race. And according to Brent asked the attorney, McCauley, well, what should I do? And Mr. McCauley said, well, you need to call Boyd and find out which way's up on this. So that's how it kicked off. And
so that was the first of the two famous two noted phone calls placed by Brent Lambert, the mayor, to his rival, the man he's trying to unseat.
Correct. And I think there were three phone calls: the 15th, the 16th. No, I'm sorry, the 16th, the 21st. I'm getting the dates. It's all just kind of swimming together. But yeah, so Brent calls Tim, and he says, "Hey, what's going on?" And Boyd tells him that his campaign team, his political team, had dug up some information that was potentially damaging to Brent. I've listened to the tapes. There was this press conference yesterday. And he doesn't divulge what that damaging information might be, but he just says if it comes out, it won't be good. And
it won't be. Does Tim Boyd say it won't be good for whom, or it won't be good for your campaign?
It won't be good for you, Brent, is basically what he's saying. That he wouldn't want this kind of information to come out on him, and he was basically giving Brent a heads up. He said that he had spoken with his campaign team and said, "Look, let me call Brent. Let me get in contact with Brent and give him a heads up on this." And so Brent says, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And Boyd says, "Well, as your opponent in this, I would prefer that you drop out of the race." And Brent said, "Well, let me think about it for a while." So he goes back, and I guess he discusses it with his people. There's a second phone call, and nothing really more comes out. It's just, "I've got damaging information on you, Mr. Lambert, and I would prefer that you drop out of the race."
And what Dick Cook, this is David Tullis. Thanks for joining us. We're talking with Dick Cook, who runs East Ridge News Online. That's the local news source in East Ridge News Online. And this is David Tullis. Caller, you've got a question for Dick Cook, please. Okay. All right. So the question that I want to ask you, Dick Cook, my caller not having occasion to ask his, was the information that Tim Boyd had in mind, was it information that was publicly available? Was it information that was secret? Was it somehow found out by a private investigator or a spy or something like that, or a traitor in the Brent Lambert camp? Was it public information, or was it hidden information?
Well, it was public information. Apparently, the information is centered on campaign contributions that Mr. Lambert received in June of 2017, a total of $5,000. $3,000 of that money was from the developers of Exit 1. Another $1,000 from Emerson Russell, who's a businessman over there and has been for many years, and another $1,000 from a private individual. I think his name is Terry Watts. I had written about this on February 3rd in a column in East Ridge News Online under the title, "Timing is Everything." These contributions came 31 months after Lambert was elected. He was not running for any public office at that time. I found it kind of unusual. And I pointed out in the column, there's nothing illegal about this. There's nothing illegal about raising money. It's the timing of when the money was raised. What in particular, the timing, the campaign contributions came 12 days after the East Ridge City Council voted to secure $2.5 million in financing for the reconfiguration of Exit 1. That just, to me, seemed a little odd.
What was the third phone call about, Dick Cook?
The third phone call was a follow-up call. If I'm not mistaken, Brent said he wanted to think about it for a while. And
was that third call placed also by Brent Lambert?
Third call was placed by Brent.
Okay, so Brent calls Tim Boyd, the commissioner. Okay.
Yeah. And he tries to, he says, "Look, Brent says, Tim, I've given it a great deal of thought, and I don't think I've done anything wrong. And I'm going to stay in the race." And Boyd says, "Well, okay, we'll see how it works out." And that was basically it.
Well, what we have we're talking with Dick Cook, who runs East Ridge News Online. It is a news site for East Ridge. And we're talking about the extortion criminal case levied by the state itself against Commissioner Tim Boyd. And the statute in question is the extortion statute. And my assessment of it is that it's a very loose and vague statute that says a person commits extortion who uses coercion upon another person with the intent to, and then there are three things that one intends to do: to obtain property, service, any advantage or immunity. That's one. And then the second one is restrict unlawfully another's freedom of action. Now there's the problem there, because the word unlawfully has to refer within the code itself to this provision, that what makes it unlawful. That's really an undefined term. if it's extortion and it's unlawful, well, what makes it unlawful? And here's the statute that doesn't really explain what is unlawful. Where does the lawlessness begin, and where does it end? And the third part is a rather longer part. I won't read the whole of it, but it makes reference to impair any entity from the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured in the Constitution, etc., in an effort to obtain something of value for any entity. And then the third one in that sequence says, for purposes of the section, corporate campaign means any organized effort to unlawfully bring pressure on an entity other than through collective bargaining. So in other words, collective bargaining is allowed, it's not extortion, but other pressure is not. So we have a very broad statute that's provisions would encompass business practices, Dick Cook, and also encompass just politics. I mean, think in politics, Dick Cook, when you say you're a fellow state legislator, and if you don't vote for my bill, I'm going to vote against your bill. And guess what? I'm going to come into your campaign, which in the next season, which is your district is next to mine. I'm going to campaign against you. That's a political threat. And if you're a bigwig in the legislature and the guy you're talking to is a newbie, that's a threat. Is that extortion in a political context?
Well, I have no idea. I'm sorry. I'm puzzled by all of it. To me, it just seems like it's politics. I think Boyd was trying to give Lambert a heads up, trying to save him some grief, possibly. But this damaging information was already in the public realm, and I don't understand that. And it's quite puzzling. One of the things that Lambert said in a Friday press conference was that he applauded the TBI's thorough investigation. A couple of years ago, there was a TBI investigation in Eastridge that centered around forged government documents, and this pertained to a wrecker ordinance there were several copies floating around, and nobody knew which copy was the real copy and which was the fake copy. Signatures were identical. It was the focus of all this was a new player wanted to come into Eastridge and set up a wrecker service. And the city, of course, controls who gets the district calls. So there were two wrecker services that were there. Another guy wanted to hone in. But the investigation, we put on hold an ordinance that the city council was considering on the recommendation of our city attorney. Said, wait, hold off. Don't amend this ordinance until the TBI investigation is complete. Now, this dadgum TBI investigation lasted, David, the better part of a year. And as best I can tell, the investigators from the TBI interviewed 6 people.
Is that a lot or is that a few?
I think it's a few. And it took them a year to interview 6 people. I don't know. The results of that TBI investigation were turned over to the district attorney's office. And buddy, I was waiting for bated breath to find out what was going to happen with this investigation that the TBI did. I got in touch with the district attorney's office. I did not speak to Neil Pinkston personally, but one of his underlings told me that Mr. Pinkston had reviewed this investigation and that there was no activity that rose to any criminal level. And therefore, there was no indictment. This investigation that the TBI did as it pertains to the phone calls, and Lambert says that he was threatened, 2 weeks. 2 weeks was the investigation. I don't know who they talked to. I don't know what other evidence they might have outside of just the tapes. And frankly, I was, as a layman, I didn't know if Lambert, if he was able to actually release tapes that could be evidence in a criminal prosecution. I was puzzled by that, but our district attorney's office said it was kosher. The tapes they belong to Lambert, and he can do whatever he wants to with them.
To say for Brent Lambert to say Dick Cook of Eastridge News Online, for Brent Lambert, the mayor, to say that his family, his business, his career and his political career are jeopardized by this very gentle proposal by Tim Boyd. Seems very very tender. Somehow in this story, Brent Lambert comes across as highly vulnerable, highly weak, highly fragile. Not a rough and tumble player, which he really is. I mean, Brent Lambert is he is an aggressive businessman. He's very sharp. He's very shrewd. And I think the Time Free Press editors think that he's very shrewd too, because the photographs that they've published of him catch an expression of him that looks kind of calculating, kind of tough, kind of not duplicitous, but a little bit crafty. That's the impression that the photograph that the editors chose for him, and that may be because Dick Cook, you've worked in the Times Free Press newsroom, as have I, and East Ridge, even back 20, 30 years ago, has had this reputation of being just a rough and tumble, kind of mean place, where all the parties are constantly scrapping after one another.
I don't
say something.
What, are you looking for a response from me on this? Yeah, politics in East Ridge is it's difficult to characterize.
You call it a blood sport. This is David Toulis, caller. You're live on the air with Dick Cook from East Ridge News Online, and me. What's on your mind?
Good show, guys. But I don't have a dog in this race. But there's a reason why we have RICO statutes, and that's because of that phone call. You've got to be kidding me. I mean, come on. The guy basically threatened him, as far as I'm concerned, what I heard. That's exactly what the mafia does. You know, hey, listen, you know, you realize your window could be broken. You do realize that, you know, but if we can, you know, for $200 a week, we'll make sure your window is broken and you're not protected. Do you realize if a radio station walks in behind your station and tries to get them to cancel the contract, you can be charged under RICO? Come on. I mean, I'm just listening to the tapes. He should be praying I don't sit on that jury, because if that wasn't a threat, there is no threat. I mean, you know, hey, David, I got stuff about your family, you know, and I'm your political opponent. So, you know, I recommend you get out of the race because it may get released.
I think the problem, Mike, I think Neil Pinkston's, the point where Neil Pinkston decided to act was the question, or the comment, I think you should get out of the race. At that moment, the loss of freedom of Brent Lambert comes into view, and the suggestion that Tim Boyd perhaps should not have said that he should not have gone that far as to make that suggestion. He could have just said, I have this information, and here's what it is.
No, he shouldn't have, and that's what
just left it.
Let the jury decide, because I can't believe these words are coming out of my mouth, but in this instance, I agree with Pinkston.
Okay, well, we have a caller who's taking the side of Brent Lambert. So Dick Cook, you're the editor of East Ridge News Online, and you are overseeing this story. You're kind of shepherding this story. And there was my mark on the printout of your story. Lambert plays audio tapes of Boyd conversations. Was that it was a citrusy Sally, because it was in the Orange Room, a very strange setting for this, in which the members of the public were kept out, but you were allowed in. And other members of the press were allowed in to hear these. The wife of the mayor, Mandy, play the audio tapes for about 30 minutes or so. Very citrusy, kind of saucy.
It's political theater in my mind. Brent said he wasn't going to let the public in at large because they would be disruptive or could be disruptive, and that he's had to throw people out of city council meetings in the past. You know, I listened to the tapes, and I got to give Boyd a heads up or a thumbs up for saying, hey, look, my campaign has some damaging information. And they could have ran with it and gone with it. It was in the public realm. But Boyd said, well, hold off and let me talk to Brent and give him a clue as to this could damage him.
And also the clue had a benefit to it also, because didn't Tim Boyd, Dick Cook say, what did he say after this term? What?
Oh, after this term, this was going to be the end. He was going to retire not only from public life, but he was going to retire from his business pursuits as well.
And you, Brent Lambert, might run for this spot.
Exactly.
That's a favor.
And David, I was stunned because Brent was going to run against Boyd. I thought the setup was going to be Boyd was going to run for mayor, county mayor, because over the last 18 months to 2 years, Boyd has gone after the WWTA. He's demonized those people, and the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and he's laid what he thinks is a failure of the WWTA and the Convention and Visitors Bureau at the feet of Jim Coppinger. I thought Boyd was going to run for mayor, but no, he runs for re-election. And Lambert's challenging him. I begged Lambert to stay on as mayor.
He's a good mayor.
I wouldn't go that far. I think he's okay. I mean, he beats some of the alternatives we had. I mean, in the last election, Jim Bethune was going to run for mayor until Frances Pope, full disclosure, she is my mother-in-law, couldn't let him just waltz into the mayor's office unopposed. But, you know, I wanted Lambert to stay as mayor because on balance, the city is moving forward. The city is not being as transparent as it could be under Lambert's administration, but we've got some things in the works.
And taking advantage of that border statute to bring new development into the city, increasing its tax base remarkably, that's Brent Lambert's work.
He's taking full credit for it, but the council, previous councils that Brent had served on, and Brent has been mayor. Yeah, he is largely responsible for the Border Region Act coming into East Ridge. But at that time, our city attorney was John Anderson. And Anderson, it was his idea for the city to capitalize on a state law that was designed for Kingsport and Bristol, if I'm not mistaken. And Brent had been mayor for all of like 2 weeks when Anderson took him by the hand and they went up to Nashville to have a little conversation about East Ridge possibly getting on board with this. Well, we did. And there has been some development. The Bass Pro is completed. Chick-fil-A is on the way. And a motel is being built down there too. There's a tremendous amount of potential, David.
Dick Cook, how can my listener find out more about your work?
Go to eastridgenewsonline.com. It's on the web.
eastridgenewsonline.com. And it's free too. He didn't have to pay for it?
No payment.
Okay. Dick Cook, thanks for joining us here on the David Tooley Show.
My pleasure, Dave.
Dick Cook is a longtime Chattanooga journalist and a real expert in doings in East Ridge. So if you care about ideas and care about local politics and how they work out, go to East Ridge News Online, eastridgenewsonline.com. This is David Toulis. We argue for local economy and a free market and suggest you love your neighbor and buy local. And we're brought to you by yournews.com, yournews.com. See the MF on the latest post at local news at yournews.com.